frog jumps into an ancient pond. A splash breaks the silence. And, well, in just 17 syllables, a 17th century monk just perfectly captures the fragile mortality of the human race. Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, it really is amazing how much weight those few words can hold.
Right. So our mission today is to explore this fascinating collection of Japanese poetry. It's translated by Daniel C.Buchanan, and it's called 100 Famous Haiku. We are going to unpack the technical architecture, the history, and really the deep spiritual essence of these tiny, highly concentrated verses.
And I think this discussion really elevates our understanding of how language can function under, extreme pressure. We're looking at a literary form where haiku act as these incredibly precise word pictures.
Exactly.
But they aren't just descriptions of nature, right? They're more like invitations. They actively prompt you, the reader, to step into the songs they deliberately create and construct your own meaning out of that void.
And for you listening, if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by, I don't know, endless scrolling, algorithmic feeds, and just the absolute information overload of the modern world, this deep dive is kind of the perfect antidote. We're turning to an art form where absolute brevity is the ultimate virtue.
It really is the ultimate virtue here.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even get into the profound spiritual depths of these poems, we really need to look at the strict mechanical container they're poured into. You just don't get this level of minimalism without an incredibly rigid framework forcing the poet to distill their thoughts.
Right, the structural rule of a haiku is pretty famous for its strict boundaries.
Yeah.
It consists of exactly 3 lines.
Yes.
There are 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, and 5 in the third line. So that gives the poet a grand total of 17 syllables to work with. But the thing is, applying the English concept of a syllable to this Japanese art form actually misses a critical piece of the linguistic mechanics.
Because the Japanese language relies on a different phonetic structure entirely, right? It uses sound units that are much shorter than what we consider a syllable in English.
Exactly. The Japanese language uses phonetic units called morae.
Morae. Okay.
Yeah, and a morae dictates rhythm, and it's often much, much brisker than an English syllable. So take the English word haiku. That's 2 syllables, but in Japanese, it's 3 morae. Haiku.
Haiku. Wow, yeah. And our English syllables often have these heavy consonant clusters that take way longer to say.
Right, so when an English writer crams 17 syllables into a poem, it can feel kind of clunky, like it's overstuffed. But 17 morae in Japanese, that's incredibly brisk. It's just a fleeting breath of sound.
It's like a literary espresso shot. It strips away all the watery fluff and just delivers this highly concentrated jolt of meaning. You're trying to fit massive universal subjects like the changing of seasons, the inevitability of death into a space so small it barely registers before it's gone.
Which is exactly why the form evolved the way it did. This practice actually originated hundreds of years ago in Japan as a communal parlor game.
Wait, really? A parlor game?
Yeah, poets would gather and collaborate on these really long linked verses called renga. And the very first starting verse of those interlocking chains was known as the hoku.
Hoku, which translates to sending verse.
Exactly. And that hoku carried an immense burden. It had to establish the season, set the tone for the entire session, and honor the host of the gathering, all in that tiny space.
That is a lot of pressure for one little opening stanza.
It was. And eventually, that opening stanza proved to be the most compelling part of the whole exercise. Poets started composing these short verses purely for the joy of the singular image.
And that's when they became known as haikai, meaning suitable play, which leads to the term haiku or play verse today.
Yes, and part of that playfulness really stems from the inherent musicality of the Japanese language. I mean, Western poetry historically relies heavily on rhyming couplets, iambic pentameter, strict accentuation.
You definitely look in vain for those characteristics in a haiku.
You do. The beauty of the haiku is built entirely on the fact that almost every Japanese word ends in one of the 5 vowel sounds, A, I, U, E, O, or the consonant N.
So it flows with this natural, unforced rhythm. The text notes that this specific linguistic trait makes the poems incredibly pleasing to the human voice when read aloud. They're also highly onomatopoeic, meaning the words themselves echo the acoustic reality of the nature they describe.
Right. The sound of the poem actually mimics the rustling of bamboo or the falling of rain.
Which is brilliant. And the structural boundary of that 575 more account, combined with that flowing rhythm, creates a container that just cannot hold excess.
Sprawling exposition is literally impossible. The limitation forces the poet to focus intensely on a single crystal clear observation.
This brings up a really fascinating aesthetic comparison for me. If a traditional Western epic poem is a massive, detailed mural that fills an entire wall with color and action, a haiku operates more like the negative space in a minimalist painting.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, in minimalism, the blank, unpainted canvas surrounding a single brushstroke is doing all the heavy lifting. The haiku poet is deliberately carving out an enormous amount of empty space.
And that aesthetic of understatement, the omission, is inextricably linked to the spiritual roots of the form. To really grasp haiku, you have to understand the strong influence of Zen Buddhism.
Because Zen emphasizes mysticism and deep, silent contemplation, right? And the transience of life.
Exactly. It teaches that everything in the physical world is fleeting and impermanent. Many of the early legendary haiku writers, like Matsuo Basho and Moritake, were actually itinerant priests or lay members of monasteries.
They spent decades just wandering the countryside, observing nature, and meditating on impermanence. So that Zen worldview really dictates the actual construction of the poetry.
It completely dictates it. Haiku rely entirely on symbolism and hidden suggestion. They actively avoid elaborate descriptions. The poet steps back, presents a single unadorned image, and allows the profound silence around that image to speak.
Okay, but I want to push back on that methodology a little bit. If a poet deliberately relies on omission, silence, and suggestion, isn't there a massive risk that the message just gets lost entirely?
How do you mean?
Well, if the poem is just a vague gesture toward an emotion, doesn't it fail as a piece of communication?
Ah, I see. Well, it only fails if you view poetry as a one-way lecture delivered to a passive audience.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Within the framework of Zen philosophy, the poem is not meant to be a closed loop of communication. The poem is actually incomplete without your active participation.
So the reader is deliberately expended to supply the missing context.
Yes, it's a collaboration. The poet provides the initial spark, a precise, fleeting observation of the natural world. But you, the reader, have to bring your own emotional kindling to make the fire catch.
That requires a lot of active, imaginative labor from the reader.
It does. And it's why haiku are designed to be read repeatedly over the course of a lifetime. Depending on your current mood, your accrued experiences, your stage of life, the exact same 17 syllables will yield a completely different interpretation. The silence is the space where your mind goes to work.
That makes so much sense. Let's examine how this aesthetic of omission actually functions in practice by looking at the towering figure of the form, Matsuo Basho.
Yes, we definitely need to talk about Basho.
He lived from 1644 to 1694, and he's universally recognized as the master who elevated haiku into a profound vehicle for Zen contemplation.
Basho's most famous poem really serves as the ultimate masterclass in this technique. The translation goes, "Into the old pond, a frog suddenly plunges, the sound of water."
It is entirely devoid of emotional adjectives. He doesn't describe the stillness of the garden or the age of the surrounding trees or his own internal state of peace. He simply gives us the ancient pond.
Right. The old pond implies this eternal, profound, undisturbed silence. But the human mind struggles to comprehend eternal concepts without a contrast.
You need something to compare it to.
Exactly. So Basho makes that ancient, eternal silence visceral by interrupting it with a sudden momentary action, the quick, unceremonious plunge of a frog.
And the instantaneous sound of water. He juxtaposes the eternal and the momentary in a single breath, bringing the abstract concept of eternity into sharp sensory focus.
He was a master of that contrast. And he applies that same principle to human history, too. He wrote another renowned poem while sitting among the grass-covered ruins of Takadate Castle.
Which was once the mighty, sprawling headquarters of a powerful warrior clan. Tens of thousands of men fought, schemed, and died for control of this land.
Yes, and looking at that landscape, Basho writes, "You summer grasses, glorious dreams of great warriors, now only ruins."
Wow. He takes the immense, bloody ambitions of an entire warrior class and just reduces them to their ultimate reality. The glories of yesterday are entirely wiped away.
Right, the only thing that remains, the only thing that actually endures is the cyclical growth of the seasonal summer grasses over their ashes. It is the definitive Zen meditation on the utter vanity of human ambition.
And what makes Basho so brilliant is his ability to shift his focal length. In that Takadate Castle poem, he uses the macro scale of an entire ruined civilization. But in his poem about the camellia flower, he shifts to a micro scale to convey the exact same Zen concept.
Oh, the camellia bell.
Yes, he writes, "Falling upon earth, pure water spills from the cup of the camellia."
The cultural context of the camellia flower is what elevates that specific poem into something deeply poignant. because in classical Japanese literature, the samurai is frequently compared to the camellia.
Right, because of the unique way the flower dies. A camellia doesn't wither slowly, dropping its petals one by one to the wind. When it falls, the heavy blossom detaches and drops to the ground in one solid whole piece.
Which is a direct visual metaphor for a samurai in battle. A brilliant, vibrant life suddenly and entirely cut down in a single stroke of a sword.
And Basho uses the image of pure water spilling from that heavy dropped flower. It's as if a camera lens pulls a remarkably tight focus on a single, tiny, heartbreaking detail, the spilled water from a dropped petal, to explain a massive, complex tragedy like the mortality of a warrior class.
That lens analogy captures his methodology perfectly. Basho's deep study of Zen in his later years allowed him to achieve what Buddhist teachings refer to as the obliteration of personality.
Obliteration of personality, so removing the ego entirely from the observation.
Yes, the poet steps out of the way. Basho does not insert himself into the poem to tell you how he feels about the fallen samurai or the ruined castle.
He just allows the universe to deliver the message through the spilled water or the growing summer grass. The observation remains pure because the observer is basically invisible.
Exactly.
But as profound as Basho's ascetic Zen detachment is, the deep dive sources highlight that the haiku form isn't strictly limited to quiet, invisible contemplation. It's equally capable of capturing striking visual artistry and deeply relatable, almost comical human empathy.
Oh, absolutely. And this is vividly demonstrated in the works of two other grandmasters, Busan and Kobayashi Isa.
Let's start with Busan. He represents a distinct shift in tone from Basho.
He does. Busan was a highly celebrated bunjin, which is a literati painter, long before he was recognized as a master poet. So he painted literal visual scrolls.
And his poetry functions through that exact same imagistic approach. He uses high visual contrast and an intense awareness of texture to evoke feeling. The poem regarding the temple bell perfectly illustrates his painterly eye.
Oh, it's a masterpiece.
He writes, "On the temple bell, something rests in quiet sleep. Look, a butterfly."
Consider the textures and weights he is juxtaposing there. You have this massive, imposing, cold bronze temple bell. It is black, it's heavy, and it represents permanence.
It's an instrument used to toll the passing of time itself.
Exactly. And resting directly against that immovable heavy object is a delicate, weightless, colorful butterfly in a state of quiet sleep.
The tension in that image is incredible. A single toll of that massive bronze bell would instantly obliterate the fragile creature resting upon it. Busan creates a visual representation of life's frailty, resting precariously on the edge of eternity.
He paints a masterpiece of contrasting scale and texture entirely within 17 syllables.
It's breathtaking.
It is. And then we have Kobayashi Isa, who utilizes the form for an entirely different purpose. If Basho is the detached Zen ascetic and Busan is the visual painter, Isa is the poet of profound, everyday human empathy.
And Isa's biography provides crucial context for his worldview here. He endured immense tragedy.
He really did. He lost his mother at a young age, suffered under a cruel stepmother, lived much of his life in abject poverty, and watched his own children pass away in infancy.
Those relentless tragedies could have easily bred cynicism or deep bitterness. Instead, they forged an intense, boundless empathy within him. He saw his own struggles reflected in the lives of the smallest, weakest creatures around him.
He felt a profound solidarity with the vulnerable. And he actively shatters Basho's rule regarding the obliteration of personality.
Right. Isa constantly inserts himself into the frame. There is a magnificent poem he composed while watching a large, dominant frog wrestling a tiny, malnourished frog in the muddy water.
Oh, I love this one.
He writes, "Oh, thin little frog, don't lose the fight. Isa is right here to help." Here's where it gets really interesting. He almost sounds like he's cheering on the underdog at a sports match. He brings such a deeply human, almost comical warmth to this pristine art form, doesn't he?
He fundamentally alters the role of the poet. He doesn't observe nature from a detached, enlightened mountaintop, calmly meditating on the cycle of life and death. He puts himself directly into the mud. He actively roots for the underdog.
And he extends that same empathetic warmth to every element of his environment, including the weather. He observes an owl looking miserable while hiding in the trees during a storm, and he writes this gentle, humorous advice.
It's framed as the dove's advice, right?
Yeah. Yes. Come on now, friend owl. Change your facial expression. This is the spring rain.
He assigns the dialogue to the dove, recognizing that doves are unfazed by the rain while owls scowl and hide. By teasing the owl, Issa is gently teasing humanity.
It's a profound lesson regarding our frustration with conditions we cannot control. You can't stop the spring rain by scowling at it.
Exactly. The misery comes from your resistance to reality, not the reality itself. So, change your expression. Accept the rain.
It really demonstrates that spiritual enlightenment doesn't require severe asceticism. Profound empathy and gentle, everyday humor can serve as their own paths to enlightenment.
Absolutely. Whether we are analyzing Basho's silent ancient pond, Dison's vibrant sleeping butterfly, or Issa cheering on his scrawny frog in the mud, these poets are utilizing the exact same mechanism.
Stripping away the endless noise of human existence.
Right. They use their 17 phonetic beats to offer the reader a momentary, intense return to what is real and physically present.
These verses serve as a highly effective shortcut to mindfulness. From their origins as the opening move in a competitive parlor game, to their evolution into profound vehicles for Zen philosophy, haiku ruthlessly eliminate the unnecessary.
They don't preach.
Right. They don't offer sprawling exposition. They paint a single, sharp picture, step out of the frame, and invite you, the reader, to complete the emotional circuit using your own memories and experiences.
They remind us that the pursuit of understanding does not always require an endless accumulation of data. Sometimes, stripping language down to its absolute barest bones allows us to perceive truths that are obscured by a mountain of words.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought drawn from the history of these poets. There is an anecdote regarding the great master Basho.
Okay.
He was walking through the countryside, actively seeking out high art and profound elegance. During his journey, he suddenly realized that true elegance did not reside in the royal courts or in complex, sprawling academic philosophy.
Where did he find it?
He found true elegance in the simple, rhythmic, everyday songs of local women as they stood knee-deep in the mud, transplanting rice in the fields. The beauty wasn't hidden in the abstract, it was right there in the mud, in the labor, in the exact present moment.
Wow.
We challenge you to apply that perspective to your own modern routine. The next time you find yourself trapped in a profoundly mundane, frustrating moment, perhaps sitting in gridlock traffic or standing in a slow-moving line at the grocery store, monitor your instincts.
The modern reflex is usually to just grab your phone.
Exactly, to immediately pull out a screen, to drown yourself in that deluge of digital words, notifications, and endless distractions. Leave the device in your pocket. Look closely at the mundane environment surrounding you.
I love this idea.
Try to mentally compose exactly 17 syllables about the precise, ordinary moment you are inhabiting. What overlooked detail, what hidden truth, or what quiet, fragile piece of beauty might you accidentally uncover in your own daily life?
Consider it a mental recalibration.
A way to wake up to the physical world sitting quietly right in front of you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.